Welcome back everyone to this Doha Smart City Summit brought to you by Mshere Properties. In this part of our day, we will have 4 engaging panel discussions tackling different aspects of a smart city readiness to a pandemic. You are watching the summit virtually, like most of your meetings this year, like your classes, your concert, even your birthday most probably took place online. While our internet usage increased drastically around the world, many challenges were raised. Connectivity might be the least problematic when you live in a smart city, but cybersecurity is not, especially when experts tell us that 40%, at least 40% of our internet usage is unsafe. So how can we make smart cities more secure? Let's hear from the experts. I will leave you with Mohammed Mohsen from Cisco Qatar. He will be moderating our first 40 minutes panel on cybersecurity and smart cities. To you, Mohammed.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to moderate the first panel in today's summit. Over the next 40 minutes or so, we'll hear from our expert panelists on cybersecurity for smart cities. My name is Mohammed Mohsen. I'm the CTO for Cisco Qatar, and without further ado, I will introduce our panelists. First, we have Ronald. Ronald Hale is a partner at KPMG Cyber in Netherlands. He's leading the technical cyber services due to his broad experience with the security of industrial systems. He's one of the global SME for security services in this sector, including smart building and industrial IoT. He enjoys over 18 years of experience in IT security, as well as in-depth cyber defense and cyber strategy in IT and OT domains. Then from Qatar, we have Dana Abdullah. Dana is the Director of Compliance and Data Protection at Ministry of Transport and Communication. She's a member of TESMO Standard Board for Information Security. She manages information security certification and accreditation program and supervises the enforcement of data privacy legislation. Dana holds a bachelor degree in computer engineering from Qatar University and an MBA from HEC Paris. Nicholas Palmer. Nicholas is the head of Group IB's global business with teams reporting to him spanning from Singapore to UK. He's a regular speaker at industry's major events like RSA, Interpol World, FS-ISAC Summit, as well as Cyber Crime Con and many others. Last but not least, we have Dr. Juan from Spain, Dr. Juan Manuel Corchado. He's a professor with chair at the University of Salamanca. From 2013 to 2017, he was the vice president of research. He was chosen twice as the Dean of the Faculty of Science, and he holds a PhD in Computer Sciences from the University of Salamanca and a PhD in Artificial Intelligence from the University of the West of Scotland. Let us start. It's year 2020. Cities we're living in are quite different than how we imagined them 30 years ago. We don't have flying cars yet. We don't have robots roaming around us in the streets yet. But science fiction movies painted an apocalyptic prophecy about the rise of machines and controlling the human life. Not in the way we're witnessing today. We're witnessing a global pandemic that's challenging every aspect of our life. Then what about the cities we're imagining for the next 30 years? They will be hugely impacted by what the industry is labeling as the fourth industrial revolution. Whether it's powered by 5G or artificial intelligence, by IoT or big data, we're not that far from having autonomous car, for example. And the key word here is connectivity. This hyper-connected world will open the door to impressive opportunities, but it will also leave many organizations and cities exposed to new entry points where cyber actors can inflict damage. In urban environments and cities specifically, this is presenting a unique challenge. The growth of smart, connected technologies that capture both public and private data can threaten the privacy if breached. And the interconnectivity of smart devices across the cities and communities means that the compromise of a single entry point make the entire ecosystem vulnerable to attacks. But connectivity is the foundational quality that defines what smart is. How then? How do city and government leaders achieve the ultimate balancing act of security? Now, to explore more, we'll ask our panelists to share their insight across 3 axes. And the first part, we'll talk about cybersecurity trends, definitely in a smart city context. And the second part, we will ask them what will be the recommendation to counter these threats. And the last part will go a little bit beyond technology to look at people and processes. Now let's start. The first part on the cybersecurity trends and landscape in smart cities context. And my first question is to Dr. Juan. Dr. Juan, part of being smart is being connected. and cities are turning to technologies like IoT to digitize their operation. What's the impact of connecting more and more sensors, of more and more devices on the security of a smart city and its infrastructure? You can unmute yourself.
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to be here with you. It's for me an honor and a pleasure. And yes, smart cities is a big issue nowadays, and security on them it's something very important. I think in general terms, smart cities provide us security, safety, and comfort, better services, better value for money. We could have cheaper electricity, for example, share domestic services costs, stronger security assistance. There are many advantages here. We could live in a more efficient and in a better access to service world also at the right time. I think across the world, there are a handful of full-blown smart cities being architected from scratch, and we have a very good example that the one we are presenting here today, as with all the things being more connected and reliance on technology. However, cities are getting smarter, means that are becoming necessarily leading with more technological infrastructure and data. That may be a problem if we don't do right thing, the thing right. And actually, one of the major points we have, and also is an advantage, is that each of these initiatives has been created with a different technology that makes things more complicated for hackers, for example, but also it's a bigger effort to all of us. We have seen the effect of cyber attacks in connected industry, in the industry 4.0. We have a lot of examples here in Europe. We have seen also how cities have been attacked. Last year, we witnessed a spread of ransomware attacks against cities, towns, and even in government organizations, even in Spain, but also, for example, Augusta and Maine show cyber attackers freeze its network and forced its city centers to close. Hackers stole around half a million dollars, US dollars, from Tallahassee in Florida, and ransomware attack shut down and shut down Louisiana state. So we have a lot of opportunities here to make things better and stop cyber attacks. And I think Main Sharif is an example of a very well connected and secure city for all of us.
Thank you, Dr. Fran. I'll go next to Ronald. Ronald, technology revolution like Industry 4.0 and Internet of Things, they're modifying the operation technology. Like take water metering, for example, compare a traditional dump isolated one versus a smart and connected one. So for a long time, we thought that those systems are safe because they are isolated, they are air gapped. Is that assumption still true? And what do we expect moving forward?
Thank you. Interesting question. If you look at it for a long time, it was assumed in the industry that air capping, which is making sure that systems are not connected to the outside world, would keep them secure. And one could argue that this premise is correct. If there's no connectivity, why would there be cyber threats? But over time, this was already violated. Think about air-gapped sites where a service needs to be done. A service provider comes, but this service provider services other sites as well. So he goes from site to site with a USB stick or maybe a dirty laptop. We have the infamous Stuxnet. It traveled through a air-gapped site and it reached it. It was truly air-gapped. And then even think about it, insider threats. Insider threats are already inside an air-gapped site, so they're inside. So what can we do? So in our role as OT security advisors, we actually see a funny thing, and there is more security vulnerabilities in sites that are truly air-gapped and sites that are used to being connected. And I wonder also why that is. Potentially because people think that the sites are isolated and thus more secure, but is that actually true? So moving forward, if you look in the current world, but also moreover in Industry 4.0, like smart cities, we'll see more and more connectivity, like a hyper connectivity. Everything will be connected to each other. And in that world, IT and OT are connected. So we have to think differently. I think in the future we have to design, and that's actually already today, we have to design and secure our systems as if they would be exposed to the outside world. Isolating and air gapping is still a good thing to do, but we should really make our systems secure by themselves so they can survive if they're air gapped or not.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you. I'll move to Nicholas for the next questions. So it has been shown that during crises and tough times, threat actors, they intensify their activities and especially target critical infrastructure because this is where the money is or the fame is. Was COVID-19 an exception in the sense that did we get a break from global threat actors during this tough period?
Yeah, I think I can answer this in kind of two parts. So, did cyber criminals give individuals a break? I would say in some cases, yes. We saw communications on underground forums where some cyber criminals were actually reluctant to conduct attacks against organizations they've infected, with 100% certainty. So that's nice to see. There's some morals in the bad guys, but in many other cases, this is not true. Cyber criminals, they adjust extremely quickly to new landscapes, whether it's OT or IT environments. For example, we saw 118% growth in different style of phishing compromise connected to COVID style of emails. And when you think about what Ronald just said about many third parties that support these smart cities and their quote unquote air gapped networks, this is a really important theme to look at. Also, we saw a very heavy increase in the social engineering attacks against different victims using COVID as a ruse to try and convince them to, open up an email or visit a web page that has been infected with malware. And I think really the landscape has changed and has changed incredibly quickly with a lot of us working remotely. Businesses worked incredibly quickly to make sure that there was no disruption in their business. But, unfortunately, security was an afterthought, and that really intensifies a lot of the gaps that different organizations have within security controls, especially with people working remotely. And I think we heard a little bit about ransomware, and certainly we see cyber criminals intensifying these efforts, even offering different services on underground forums, botnet operators actually providing access to compromised networks and cities where further actors can conduct infection of ransomware within these networks and massive disruption to different cities. We look at some of the statistics by the sectors in terms of ransomware style attacks, and no longer are we seeing it in high value targets like financial institutions and things like this, but actually a larger percentage within healthcare, government, trade and manufacturing organizations. And I think, we've seen, especially at UKD, the German hospital, the unfortunate results of what happens when, ransomware infects a hospital and patients actually have, unfortunately, the definite effects of that where people can die. So in some cases, yes, they gave us a break, but in many cases, no, they adapted to their new environment and started attacks in this campaign nature.
Thanks, Nicholas. Building on what just Nicholas and the others shared, Dana, the next question is to you. So it's an ongoing battle. Smart cities infrastructure are under attack, and there will be always a target. So can you tell us a little bit, what are the attackers looking after? Are they looking after data, after fame, after money, espionage, service disruptions? Tell us a little bit more based on your experience.
Yes, it is an ongoing battle. To be able to understand who are the adversaries for smart cities and what they will be after or looking for, it is very important that we put in mind this kind of situational awareness about this smart city. A couple of elements we need to think of, like the nature or the main theme of that smart city. Is it like an urban generic smart city? Is it an athlete space smart city? Is it a smart city where there is a lot of innovation and research with that? because for that the adversary will be looking at specific and different perspective. For example, if it is an athlete smart city, maybe the adversary will look at disruption, but whenever it is maybe innovation research based, we will be looking at data extortion or espionage. So different. Also, one of the elements that we really need to consider, where is this smart city, the geolocation of that smart city, because we will be talking about geopolitics in that regard. A very interesting story is what happened to the Winter Olympics of South Korea in 2018, when as they were just counting down for the beginning of the games, they suffered, they were under compromise, and that was a catastrophic scenario. The interesting thing about that incident or that attack was not how it has happened, but who was behind that attack. And it was a little bit tricky because the adversary was very deceptive and tried to camouflage his evidences and techniques to look like some other adversary. So the forensics teams and the investigators were it was very challenging for them to agree even on a certain threat actor. The bottom line was, and the most reliable scenario was like it was from a threat actor from a country who has some athletes that were banned from entering the game. So we really need to have these kind of thoughts in mind when we really need to understand what are the threats that are coming to the smart city. In addition to that, who are the key players? Who are the key stakeholders within the smart city? We have seen like entities has been attacked, not because of them as an entity, but because they were a partner of another entity, and vice versa. They have been attacked because they were just contracting with a service provider who was not giving them the right, let's say, support. So we're talking here about the supply chain as well. The last thing is that we really need to consider how much the smart city is coping to the threat landscape in general. Do they have their security operations in place? Do they prepare their capabilities, or they will be just like easy targets for any adversary or any threat actor? The main characteristic of the smart city attacks that we could think of is what is called chained attacks. So because in smart city we're talking about interconnectivity, interdependency. So it's very much likely that we will see attack where the threat actor will target, for example, smart traffic light system, and then pivot to different systems and technologies until he reached his target at the end, which could be like a desktop that contains confidential information and so on. So we really need to emphasize here on the importance of developing threat intelligence capabilities to be able to anticipate what kind of threats that is addressing the smart city and prepare our resilience mechanism and techniques and methodologies.
Thanks, Dana. I think it's a good segue to the second part, because we just moved from the threat landscape to taking action. And this is the second part, how we can protect this digital critical infrastructure. I want to go back to Ronald for this question. So cyber attacks are becoming more increasingly sophisticated. How do smart cities of the future, they will need to be built to secure their digital infrastructure?
Yeah, that is an interesting question, as I believe it's already a challenge to protect a single thing, a single functionality. So how would we even protect an ecosystem like a smart city? And in order to build a secure foundation, I think there's three things that we must do. Number one is that we must work with secure by design. It's a principle where security is applied from the start and throughout the life cycle of an environment or a product. Secure by design will give us secure building blocks, things people can use. So from the start, it's secure, not only on external layers, but all the layers of the environment. Next to that, secure by design will also make sure that systems are resilient. And so we basically build cybersecurity in everything we do. Number two, I think a very important one is data privacy. So you cannot apply data privacy as an afterthought. It needs to be integral as there from the start. So to make sure that the right people have access to the right information in the right context, and the data is not abused outside it. The third one is basically defense in depth. When we do security measures, we can build measures, but they might fail. Defense in depth means that we have security in multiple layers and multiple varieties of security, which means that if one thing fails, the other one can still continue. So it's a balance of protecting, detecting, and response measures. If you would question like, okay, how do I apply that? I think it's very important that it's seamless for the users and seamless for the developers. So it must be automated a lot. It must be in the backend. People can apply it automatically. And lastly, what we see in Mobility 2030 as well, I think it's a very important aspect for the audience, is that security should not be a competitive advantage. So in the ecosystems of the future, like smart cities, we must work together with competition and all the stakeholders as if we all have to protect the security environment, because security is as strong as the weakest link.
Thanks, Ronald. I want to build on that and go back to Dr. Kwan to ask him about the different security components and how we do this defense in depth. So as we are building the next set of use cases around smart cities, whether it's smart metering, smart lighting, and all of these different use cases, what are the various aspects that city administrators and city officials need to secure? In other words, is there something that's a must secure and something that's less important that can wait? It's good to secure. What's your view on this?
Okay, yes, as Ronald just said, to build a smart city in the right way is a challenge for all of us, and security should be there everywhere. The past we used to say IoT everywhere. Now we think IoT everywhere, but always with security. We should design our cities with the right technology, thinking that it could be expected that this technology will be used as an entry point for ransomware or vector activists, and we can have chaos, as Dana just said before, if we don't take care of everything, all aspects. And smart city are also dynamic ecosystems where new devices, hardware, software are introduced continuously, not just by the city managers, but by anyone. So security is an issue, and security should be behind everything. Smart cities should be constructed from the beginning, as just Ronald said, thinking that security issues will appear sooner or later. The smart city managers should design, or the management system should be designed with the adequate technology to prevent cybersecurity attacks, and thinking that we are generating in our smart cities, we are generating knowledge continually. New data is incoming, and that information should be reinforced, everything we do here. So, for example, what we do a lot on the smart cities in which we are working is safety audits continually, on a continuous basis. So we are auditing everything we have and what we do. We use strong CM systems to prevent any problem before they appear, to prevent attacks. And also, as it's been said here, ethical standards are very important. So with everything we do, the ethical standards must be part of the development of a smart city management system, and must be taken into account in the security assurance process. Important legislation. It's important for a country to have the right legislation to prevent attackers, so they know what will happen to them in case there is a problem.
Thank you, Dr. Kwan. You used the word chaos in your answers, and I'll use it in my next questions. So I'll go back to Nicholas on this one. Someone said that there are two types of organizations: ones that have been breached and those that do not realize it yet. Now, call it science fiction or not, when's the next time we're gonna hear or gonna see a hacker taking control over traffic signals in a city and planting chaos? First, did it happen before, or it's only a matter of time? And how is securing these traffic signals different than securing a laptop or a smartphone?
Yeah, thank you very much for the interesting question. Certainly it's not science fiction. I was asked not to scare people today and cause more chaos than necessary, but it's important to understand that, adversaries in many cases already have initial access points to networks that might be interesting for them. We do a lot of analysis of cyber criminals and their activity and their infrastructure. And, I could easily show example upon example of different organizations that have already been compromised and don't even know it yet. And this is really just an initial point of access for many actors, and these threat actors might not even know what they have yet. It just sits in their long list of individuals or corporations that they've compromised, waiting for further action, perhaps from other cyber criminals. And it's interesting to look at how this cyber criminal world is reacting to what is happening. As I mentioned before, there has become, a lot of people talk about ransomware as an issue, but when you look at it from the cyber criminal perspective, it's become much more popular as a business model for them. There has been different affiliate programs introduced in the cybercrime world, in total 15. And these types of affiliate programs essentially give the tools necessary for less advanced threat actors to actually conduct different attacks. If you look at the amount of network accesses that have been posted for sale on underground forums between the second half of 2019 and the first half of 2020, the number of sales has increased by almost three times, just to about 362 different corporate network access sales on underground forums. So this is certainly increasing as well. And the number of individuals that are actually selling access to these corporate networks is also increasing, showing that more and more cyber criminals are gaining access or initial access points to different corporate networks to conduct attacks. In total, 50 additional sellers appeared in the first half of 2020 of different corporate access sales. And I think also when you look at, I mentioned before, a long list of corporations that have already been compromised. Typically, this is done by botnet operators like TrickBot and QBot, Silent Night, and many others. And these botnet operators have actually started to sell initial points of compromise for further actors to conduct ransomware. So in short, it's most certainly not science fiction. I won't try to scare you any more than that, but it's definitely a real thing that many organizations don't already know that they're compromised.
Thanks, Nicholas. We'll go back to the scary part in the third section when we talk about the balancing between innovation and cybersecurity. But at this point, I want to go back to Dana. And this is 2020. We can't let COVID-19 goes without mentioning it. So COVID-19 taught us a lot of things, but one of them being used as a joke in a lot of enterprise, that digital transformation was accelerated and is being accelerated by COVID-19. And to be honest, it was under the stress of finding immediate solutions to global challenges, like keep everybody connected, deliver the service remotely, and so on. What are some of the lessons learned when it comes to cities' reaction to such a global pandemic and a global threat?
Yes, as you said, Mohammed, the digital transformation has been on the rise with this pandemic. And the key observation that we have seen is that the cloud is not a choice anymore. Like if we're talking about 2 to 3 years ago, all the questions that we were getting, how can I consider going to cloud? What should I put in place? And all our answers to that, like do your data classification, do your risk assessment, and take it as the decision. At the end, the cloud has a lot of benefits. However, with the pandemic, we have seen shifting the priorities to business continuity and crisis management. And for that, we have seen, yes, the uplifting to the digital transformation. The performance of organizations were varied because those organizations who were considering a digital transformation, that was a very smooth transition for them during the pandemic, and they did not have any disruption of their business. Others were not. So the type of questions during the pandemic were different. So most of the questions that we got, like which technology provider shall I trust? Which video conferencing tool shall I use? Which privacy policy is more reliable? So the lessons learned here that we really need to recalibrate the risks that we were considering on the top of the new facts, on the top of the new normal, if I could say. So cloud is not a choice anymore. Secure or remote work is not a choice anymore. It's really there. So because we have shifted to that, for some organization, they shifted to that very immediately. security, they really need to reconsider that, recalibrate the risks that they have, not eliminating any kind of risks or just give them a very low probability, because this is what we have seen in the pandemic. Who would think that most of the airports across the globe will be closed? And we have seen that during the pandemic. The other lessons learned that I would like to emphasize is never underestimate the importance of awareness and education. Many organizations across the globe, yes, they went to the cloud, but because they did not have the right information or the transition towards that, they got compromised very easily, where they could avoid that with a simple configuration, with a simple click or a simple tap. So this is very important. We have seen also that on the people side as well, and the individuals, the end users, where they suffered a lot what is called Zoom bombing, where they share the meeting ID and the password for the public, and because they lack the awareness of using these tools, they got this kind of attack, which is very simply a lot of malicious people hijacking this legitimate meeting and causing disruption. So the lessons learned here is, yes, it is important to prioritize business continuity during pandemic, but never neglect the importance of awareness and education.
Thank you, Dana. And this is a good transition into the third and last part of this panel when we talk about beyond technology, about people and processes. So I'll go back to Ronald on these questions. It's all about the scary part that Nicholas mentioned before. So when we talk about cybersecurity, we tend to show the scary part. It threatens people with the outcome of not complying to best practices. How we can balance between cybersecurity from one side and from the other side, innovation and agility, especially that innovation and agility are really an integral part to find the next set or next generation of smart cities use cases.
Yeah, thank you, Mohammed. I think actually I'm on a mission with that, because we should stop saying that cybersecurity is a scary thing and that it's blocking innovation. As of today, I would even challenge people to see them as friends. Cybersecurity and innovation can actually go together very well. If you have a good secure foundation, a secure basis to build your smart cities or Industry 4.0 environment, it's much easier for everyone to build up on that, because you don't have to worry about what's coming. You don't have to worry about threats. And if you recall, I discussed, and many of the participants, panel participants discussed as well, secure by design, making sure security is everywhere. So imagine when we have security everywhere, we don't have to worry about it. And it also means, as an innovative person, agile, fast, I don't have to worry that something in the future will block me, because many on the conference will recall as a business that you have a good idea, you develop it, and then 3 months down the line, the security guys come and they say, no, that's not allowed, or the CISO says, no, we cannot do that, and the business idea is blocked or modified. If we all agree on what should be there from the start, and we as security people make it seamless, again, it's hidden basically for the end user, for the developers, then cybersecurity will help to be agile and innovative. I would say that for smart cities, it's essential. And once you have security in place and the first innovations have been done, you can actually move on and innovate on that base layer. Also, as said before, the public getting more and more aware of cybersecurity. So they do also demand that things are secure. So again, to repeat that, I think there are two friends. Cybersecurity will make sure that innovation and agility are working together. And that helps us to make things and design things that are secure in both the digital, but also the physical world, like traffic lights, water pumps, housing, and you name it.
Thanks, Ronald. Nicholas, I'll go back to you on one question about processes. So we just learned that security is not something that you do at one point in time. It's a continuous process. So what do we recommend for the city's officials and administrators when it comes to cybersecurity framework? How do we ensure that there's a continuous readiness before, during, and after attacks?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Ronald led into that very, very well, thinking about security not as an afterthought, but as something that you design your smart cities around is essential. And, first and foremost, as you're designing your smart cities, you have to understand that you have adversaries. You have cyber criminals that, want to disrupt, what you're planning to do in your business endeavors. And understanding that is not a scary thing, because if you bury your head in the sand and don't think about it until it becomes too late, then as Ronald said, security really becomes a blocker of some of the business ideas that you want to implement. So I think collect information early about who your adversaries are, what tactics and tools they might use in order to cause harm to your smart cities is essential. You also need to treat your infrastructure and your business like a war zone. You really need to know your topology very well, or have security people that know your topology very well, and be able to test your security controls and your people against what your adversaries will try inevitably in order to disrupt your business. Because cyber criminals are always advancing, and they're advancing and sometimes faster than organizations can keep up. And if organizations can't keep up to the evolution of the cyber threat landscape, eventually they'll become a victim, and their business will be disrupted. And I think it's really essential to look at an incident as an opportunity. It's really an opportunity to learn. What did you do right? What did you do wrong? What tools were used? Who was the adversary that perhaps conducted that attack against you? And then constantly apply different rule sets and strategies in order to defend against these adversaries. So in some cases, actually having an incident can help you to learn. So don't be ashamed of that. Learn from it, and always assume that your network could be compromised. Understand who your adversaries are, and run offensive security tests against your tools and the people that you employ to keep your businesses protected, to see if you can defend against these adversaries. And this is always going to be a continuous process. And I think that continuous process is essential to protecting your business and the future of smart cities.
Thanks, Nicholas. I'm getting signs that we need to wrap up. But before that, I want to just open the door to Dana to just share some insights about the importance of data privacy, knowing that this is very critical to build smart cities and to build trust with the citizens. Can you share some of your experience on that?
Yes, it is very important in the beginning to address the misconception about data privacy. A lot of people would think that the data privacy regulations would prevent the flow of personal information, which is not the case. It's merely about regulating how our personal information are processed and collected within the smart cities. In a nutshell, the main important thing to consider when we're talking about data privacy within smart cities is to make sure that we apply the principles of data privacy, which are like making sure that we're collecting the data with a valid reason, or what they call it, lawful purpose or legitimate interest, or with the consent of the person. And also making sure that we minimize the data that we're collecting for the person, for the purpose we're collecting for. Like if we don't need the date of birth, we shouldn't collect it. If we don't need the geolocation, we shouldn't collect it. In addition to that, and adding to what Ronald said, like as security should be considered from the beginning, privacy as well should be considered from the beginning, and this is what they call it, privacy by design and privacy by default. And protecting this information as the data is in transit or at rest with encryption, and also what they call it pseudonymization. So in pseudonymization, we avoid collecting personal anonymous information, because within the context of a smart city, you really need personal information. You really need to tailor that service for the person. So that's why you need some personal information from the user. However, with pseudonymization, you can apply different techniques like privacy preserving techniques or algorithms to make sure that this information is still linked somehow to the person without jeopardizing their privacy. And for that, we're doing a lot of efforts in Qatar by collaborating with TESMO and the Cybersecurity Division, and putting all the standards and policies related to data privacy and also cybersecurity within the smart cities of Qatar.
Thank you, Dana. Unfortunately, time is out, so we have to wrap it up. I want to thank you all for your attendance today. I want to thank our panelists, Ronald, Dana, Nicholas, and Dr. Juan. Thank you very much for being with us today. Security goes hand in hand with connectivity, as we just learned. The moment a thing is connected, it's exposed, and the moment it's exposed, it should be secured. It's very clear, security can't be thought as an afterthought or an add-on. It should be an integral part of a smart city development process. Only a secure environment will gain citizen trust, and only a secure environment will be a prosperous place for innovation. With the hope for a healthier future, for a better and smarter and more secure city, thank you all. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, dear panelists, for this engaging discussion. And thank you, Mohammed, for moderating this panel for us. And now we move to our second panel of the day.